Minnesota has signed Dalvin Tomlinson from the New York Giants. So he's a big interior defensive lineman, 6'3", 318. He signed a 2-year, $22 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings. 20 million of that is total guaranteed. 16 mil full. Wait, no, yeah, total guaranteed on 20. Fully guaranteed is 16 million. $15 million signing bonus, and he gets $16 million in the first year. Now, from Pro Football Focus from last year in 2020, he had a 75.1 overall grade, a 7.3 run defense grade, a 74.6 pass rush grade, had 28 pressures according to them, and had 3.5 sacks. Now, how does he compare to the rest of the people we had last season? Well, for that I kind of went to Pro Football Reference because PFF be expensive. Those came off of a Twitter thing. But Pro Football Reference, I have those, and they do calculate pressures differently from the numbers I have here. But in 2020, they have him down for 15 pressures, 8 TFLs, 5 hurries, 10 quarterback hits, and 6 quarterback knockdowns, with obviously 3.5 sacks. Now, if you want to compare a majority of this to what Minnesota had, I have taken the top 4 guys on the interior defensive line that Minnesota had last year. So, Shamar Stephen, Jaleel Johnson, obviously being the first 2. Then you have Armon Watts, and technically James Lynch is also in there. So, I have compared their total combined stats with Dalvin Tomlinson's 2020. Now, I did average the total tackles and the solo tackles from, the 4 combined players, just because that felt like a more fair justification, as opposed to adding them all up and having some ridiculous number that doesn't feel comparable to me. So, from a solo standpoint, all 4 of them averaged 14 solo tackles. Dalvin Tomlinson had 25. Total, 28 average, 49 for Dalvin. Tackles for loss, 6 for the interior defensive line of 2020, 8 for Dalvin, 13 pressures to Dalvin's 15. They, each have 5 hurries, 8 quarterback hits from the interior defensive line of last year, 10 for Dalvin, quarterback knockdowns, 3 for the interior D-line, 6 for Dalvin. And they each had 3.5 sacks, so production's getting quite the raise here, because essentially you're getting double the production, and in some cases better than that. So, and that's even in the pass rush department, which I've seen many people already say, he can't pass rush. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think he's had the majority opportunity to pass rush, because he is the nose tackle, basically. So they take him off. Even when he was with the Giants, what they did was they got Leonard Williams, and then they drafted Dexter Lawrence. So basically, you had a double nose scenario in the early downs, essentially, with because they're a 3-4, so they would have one of them kicked out to defensive end. So they would have Lawrence and those 2 at the end. And then on third downs, they would take Dalvin Tomlinson off because they used him mainly as a run stuffer. But I think his numbers do show he can pass rush. Like, there is a potential there for pass rush. His pressures have gone up every year. Since 2018, he went from 8 to 13, then to 15. And then also his quarterback hits. He went from 2017, he went from 1 to none to 9 to 10. So I do think there is some potential here for pass rushing. He just may not have had the full opportunity to do so. And without a doubt, I don't think Minnesota's thinking like, oh, he's just going to be a run stuffer. I think you don't pay a guy $11 million per season to just run stuff when you're already paying a nose tackle $9 million in Michael Pierce. So, which, speaking of him being, a great run defender, he's always been that. And Minnesota last year ranked 27th in total rush defense, allowing 134.4 yards on the ground and 22nd in yards per carry at 4.6. With him teaming up with Michael Pierce in 2021 in Minnesota, I highly doubt that's happening again, and that seemed to be the biggest thing for Mike Zimmer here because, well, if you can't control the run game, then you can't control the clock, and, when you're as incompetent as they were at it last year, Alvin Kamara scores 6 touchdowns on you on national television. So, fun times. And I would assume this would mean Shamar Stephen kind of needs to kind of restructure, pay cut, or be cut. So I would kind of think his time is numbered starting, well, basically now. And I actually really like this move. I really like this move. I remember like a week or two ago, I was talking to my brother about, free agent stuff. And he asked me, because he knows they got no money, Minnesota, what my number one target would be. And I had him guess it because I didn't think he would be able to guess it, but it was Dalvin Tomlinson because of all of these reasons. It's like he's a really good run defender. I think he has some potential for pass rushing. And I don't know if I've ever said it on the channel, but for years with Zimmer, I've always thought, why not go double nose to someone who has some burst and some pass rush moves next to an actual nose tackle? And here we are. I'm really excited to see how this works out because this is something I've wanted for a very long time. Even last year, when it was the interior defensive line that it was, when they signed Michael Pierce, I kind of thought, well, what if they added a guy like a Marcel Darius? I've always wondered things like that. And now we're actually going to see if it can work. And I'm actually really excited to see that. And he is 27, so with a 2-year deal, he'll be 29 at the end of it. And I do think it makes it kind of an interesting scenario because last year Minnesota signed Pierce to a 3-year deal when he was 27 last year. Now, because he opted out, that toll's over. Basically, think of it as an injury toll, basically, with the PUP list and all that. So, now, that contract will expire when he's 31. So, Minnesota could potentially have a decision there. At the end of Dalvin's deal here. Where it's do you want to keep Tomlinson and get rid of Pierce? Do you want to, or vice versa, do you want to find a way to keep them both for at least one more year? Things like that. So, that will be interesting when we cross that path. But I really like this deal. I think it was a very needed deal. I know they were looking at pass rushers. There were a lot of rumors around them with pass rushers. But the entire time I was thinking, interior defensive line is a bigger problem than edge rusher. Even with all the Hunter stuff going on, which will get its own video. But even with all of that going on, and you look at last year, when you had the hodgepodge of Jalen Holmes and Odenigbo and Mataafa, Wanham, all those guys, compared to the interior defensive line was awful, and most of those players probably should not be on the roster. So the entire time they were looking at edge rushers or talking about a corner, I was like, if you're going to go defense, you got to fix this interior defensive line because you will... teams don't even need to throw on you to win. That's usually a problem. So even with Michael Pierce coming back, this was a much-needed move, especially since in the draft, you have some talented prospects, sure, but you have nothing that's surefire. I know a lot of people like Christian Barmore. I'm actually pretty low on Barmore, and a lot of people aren't. But this would probably take you out of Barmore as well. This is your 3-tech. Don't get that confused. I think this will be a guy that actually gets some sacks. He may have a career high in sacks, which, once again, he only needs to get 4. but I wouldn't be surprised if he has 5, 6, and on the high end, maybe even 7, especially if you bring back Hunter and you have Pierce next to him. You're going to have to not account for somebody, and there's a good chance he could be that somebody. So I would like to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Liking and subscribing, super helpful. And until next time, I bid you all adieu.